Hi there, thank you so much for joining the Soul Revolution masterclass tonight. The how, the why, and the who. Now, just before we get started, whilst we're waiting for a few more people to attend, I wonder if you wouldn't mind just answering a couple of questions. I've got a couple of polls just to give me an idea of who's online and what you're all doing. So here's the first one. If you can answer this one just here for me, please. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining the webinar today. It's wonderful to see so many of you have come online to find out more about Soul Revolution and how we can help more people. So what I'd like to do today is really go through a bit of the why. How can Soul Revolution help people? What people should we really be encouraging to wear these? And maybe a little bit more information as to how I introduce the reason behind Soul Revolution Orthotics to someone for the first time. So when it comes to orthotics and feet, for a lot of people there's a bit of a barrier or a bit of a blockage, in so much that really, I mean, even when I first graduated, if someone were to have told me then that I was going to be doing orthotics and looking at people's feet the way I am, I would have probably thought they were absolutely crazy. Because, for me, back then, feet were really the domain of podiatrists. I hadn't really done a lot of training to know what to do with feet, the valgus, the varum, the angles, and so on. So, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to the feet, certainly for the first 5 or more years in practice. Now, in later years, what I've been realizing is, for what I do, the nervous system is just so incredibly important. The more we're learning about neuroplasticity and stimulating the different areas of the brain, I'm really starting to understand and appreciate how incredibly important the feet are. And I'm going to go through some slides with you in a moment that goes through some of the research as to how that happens. So really, the way I look at the Soul Revolution Orthotics, it's a little bit like recommending a decent pillow for someone to sleep on. Does someone have to have neck pain to need a decent pillow to maintain good posture while they're sleeping? Does someone have to have tight shoulders to need to have good posture or good ergonomics when they're sitting in front of a computer? Well, no, of course not. They're good for everybody. So the same thing goes really with having a functional orthotic. So let me just describe a little bit of the difference between a typical orthotic and a Soul Revolution orthotic. So a typical orthotic really is concerned with foot position. And they like to have a good arch height, and they like to make sure there's good calcaneal position, and the valgus and varum angles are as they should be. Soul Revolution isn't so much concerned with the anatomical position, more the movement and the stimulation. You see, we all know that from a proprioceptive point of view, the spine is the most richly innervated part of the body with proprioceptors. And the reason for that is you can't move the right side of the spine without moving the left side at the same time. So in doing that, what you're doing is stimulating both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously. So that's very smart. What I've learned, though, is that the feet are actually the second most richly innervated part of the body with proprioceptive nerves. And the reason for that is, without that facility, our ability to negotiate the terrain and the land would be vastly reduced. So the feet play a very critical role in our body's ability to balance, coordinate, and adapt to its environment. Now, we have a couple of major issues. The first one is, most people understand that we have a medial arch. So if you look at shoes that do have some support, typically there'll be a medial arch support. When you ask most people, do you know there's actually 3 arches in the midfoot? Pretty much every single time, it's a, no, I never knew that. Even after chiropractic college, I didn't realize there were 3 arches in the in the midfoot. So anatomically we have 3 arches, yet our footwear never supports all 3 arches. The second problem is we're the only animals that have actually created the environment we live in, and it's a very stressful environment, especially for the feet, because we're walking on concrete, we're walking on tiles and floorboards. The arches of the feet just get hammered. So pretty much most people have got at least 1 dropped arch through their foot. Now the thing is, it's not always painful. Because this happens progressively over time, as the arch starts to drop, the nerves actually get compressed. And as they get compressed, they quieten. They send fewer signals up to the brain. And that's where the problem comes in, because we're not consciously aware of there being a problem because there's no pain in the foot, yet our body's ability to stabilize and to adapt and control is reduced. And it's come on so slowly, we're often not even aware just how detrimental it's been. A really good test that I love to do in practice is I ask people to walk from one end of the room to the other end. Try and get about 10 steps if you can. And first of all, just looking straight ahead with their eyes open and walking heel to toe. And just see how they go. Then you get them to turn around and say, okay, this time I'd like you to close your eyes. Get them to close their eyes and repeat that test. See how many can go more than 3 or 4 steps. It's not many. And even the ones that can will still say, wow, yeah, that was really a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging. And that's because the proprioception from their feet, they're not getting the signals or the messages to the brain clearly. So that's a pretty good functional test or way of actually assessing someone or demonstrating to them that they're not getting clear messages through their nervous system from their feet. So for me, I used to do muscle testing and stability testing and so on to see who needed the orthotics. It's interesting, with the pilot studies we're starting to run now on the balance boards and the strength testers, they're taking samples that haven't been tested, and we're finding pretty much everyone is actually noticing an improvement in function. So for me now, the Soul Revolution Orthotics are not just for people with pain or obvious problems. They're for anyone who wants to stimulate and have a properly functioning dynamic through the soles of their feet. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through some of the research and some of the slides to demonstrate this to you, because I don't want you just to take my word for it. At the end of the day, you need to have the confidence and understanding and belief that what you're recommending is actually going to be good for the person you're looking after. We'll also run, at the end, we'll do a question time. So you'll notice on your taskbar on the computer, there's a box at the bottom that you can write questions into. I've muted your mics just through the session, just because I find if 2 or 3 people are talking at once, it gets pretty confusing pretty quickly. So like I said, I will try and answer as many of your questions as possible. If you feel that I haven't been able to answer your questions as fully as you'd like, please contact me afterwards. We can have a discussion offline, and to be honest, that'd be great, because I find there's questions come up all the time that maybe I hadn't looked at it in this way, and so that will always help people in the future. So let's go to the slides and start going through some of the research. One of the things that I've been working with, there's a wonderful lady up in Brisbane, and she's actually been a podiatrist for nearly 40 years. Now, she actually came out of podiatry because what she realized was she was fighting a losing battle, because essentially for most people, their footwear is so appalling, and that's where it's creating the problem. So she's actually traveled around the world finding footwear and shoes that actually work with the body. And we were just up there today, and she said, when I first saw the Soul Revolution Orthotics, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Why didn't I make something like this sooner? So she actually loves them. But here's a piece of research that came out not too long ago. And, 95, that's not too long ago for me at my age. And what they found, if you look at the highlighted bit at the end, I highlighted that for our emphasis, is that footwear impairs foot position awareness in both young and old. So what happens is because of the change in movement and the change in stimulation with the footwear, what's happening is the brain isn't actually getting an accurate message as to exactly what the feet are up to. And as we'll find out in a moment with the research, there's a lot of importance now that's being spent on proprioception and the feet themselves. So with all these slides and the research, I'm more than happy to send them to you or email them to you after the presentation. So if you like that, just either type it in the question or the chat section and or contact me offline. That's not a problem at all. So how do the soul revolutions really manage to make a difference? And I think the first thing you've got to look at is our basic anatomy, anatomy 101. And as I said a second ago, it was a real eye-opener to me when I realized that it wasn't just a medial arch that we actually have in the mid part of the foot. So when we look at the anatomy, all you've got to do is Google search arches of the feet, and any anatomical website will come up with something very similar to this. And it shows quite clearly that we have 3 arches in the feet. Now, the problem arises from this is there are no shoes, there's no footwear that I know of that people would commonly or generally buy that would actually support all 3 arches. So we have footwear that doesn't support us or doesn't support our anatomy, and we're walking on hard surfaces, concrete, tiles, and floorboards. And the combination of that is really just devastating. So the next thing, obviously, stability. Now, we're all fairly familiar with this kind of kinematic image or picture that if an arch drops, it creates rotation. Well, one thing that I came across just recently talks about the fascia. Now, you can look it up. Tom Myers anatomy trains, and there's all kinds of things on the internet about this. But what really stuck out, it kind of comes down to the way most people look at the body and most people learn about the body, is we look at the body from a very textbook kind of parameter. So when I say textbook, we see static images. We don't look at how the body moves. And one term or one session we might learn about the upper limb. Another session we might learn about the lower limb, and the heart studies separate to the lung studies. But really, it's all interconnected. And where the connections are really apparent is actually through the fascia. Now, Tom Myers, what he managed to discover was we don't have a whole series of separate compartments when it comes to fascia. In fact, the fascia in our feet, or the plantar fascia, runs in one continuous line all the way up through the lower limb, the pelvis, up through the erector spinae, into the occiput, up over the top of the cranium to just above the ridge of the eyebrows. Now, as we all know, fascia is fairly highly innervated with nerve endings and fibers, and once you create stress or torsion in one part of the fascia, that torsion or stress will continue throughout the entire length. Now, when you consider that your feet or your plantar fascia is actually connected to your cranial fascia, a lot of attachments to the base of the occiput there. Sorry if the writing's a bit blurry, it's not your eyesight, it's actually the copy of the image. But when you realize that connection between your feet and the occiput and even the cranium, then this all really starts to make a lot more sense as to why are feet a chiropractic thing. Well, obviously we've got the anatomy, now we've got the connections all the way up through the erector spinae into the occiput, and then probably the biggest one for me is the proprioception. Okay, from a chiropractic point of view, I think it's really very little to do with the bones in the back. I think it's very much to do with the nerves and the functioning of the body through the nervous system and the brain. But when we look at proprioception, obviously we have the brain here in that one section, and it sets commands, and those commands tell our body what to do, and then the body sends information back. And that's very much the way I learned neurology and anatomy. The interesting thing that I found out not so long ago was that if you took a cross-section of the spinal cord 80% of the nerves in the spinal cord travel up. So 80% of the nerves travel up to the brainstem. Because you see, the way the brain works, you can have, imagine a computer. You could have the most powerful, most expensive computer, and that computer will do nothing until you push a button or click a button on the mouse. You need to feed that computer input for it to actually be able to do stuff and demonstrate just how fantastic it is. Well, our brain is exactly the same. It needs input. Now, interestingly enough, of those nerves going up to the brainstem, over 40% of those are proprioceptors. Now, proprioceptors, why would we need so many proprioceptors going from our body up to the brainstem? Well, what they found is that the proprioceptors help to stimulate the brain and increase brain activity. And if you think about the way humans evolved, we relied on movement to survive. So as we move, we actually stimulate or create activity in the brain. And you may have noticed this yourselves. You know, sometimes when you're on a phone call, maybe it's an intensive phone call, you're really having to concentrate. It's easier if you move around or walk around whilst you're talking to that person. Or sometimes, you know, you'll sit in front of the computer and you're trying to get stuff done. Yet if you get up and move around and walk around whilst you're walking around, you manage to solve the problem or the question that you had. And so those proprioceptors are really, you know, vital to brain activity. Now, the part of the body that has the most amount of proprioceptors is in the spine. Now, why would the spine have the most number of proprioceptors? Well, quite simply, you can't move the right side of the spine without moving the left side of the spine. And so as you move both sides of the spine, you stimulate both hemispheres of the brain. The second most highly innervated part of the body with proprioceptors is actually the feet. So again, the feet are very much a chiropractic issue if you're interested in the nervous system. Now, the next thing, obviously, performance. You know, as we do adjustments, as we look after people and we care for people, we really want them to be able to perform better. So what they've looked at is elite athletes and their ability to perform and also prevent injuries, which is another thing, obviously, we're all very much concerned with. And what they did is they did a whole series of tests where, again, they looked at proprioception. Now, they say ankle proprioception, but what they actually did was they stimulated the Golgi tendon organs and the ligaments in the plantar fascia. And this is what they found. So balance control improvement is one of the most important goals in sports exercise. Okay, like I said, better balance is strongly positively associated with enhanced athletic performance. So balance is important. Now, what they concluded was proprioception plays an essential role in balance control. So what they found was that if you get the right proprioception from the foot and the ankle, then that is one of the most important things as athletes they need in order to control their balance and then obviously prevent injuries in the future. Now, this was a great one. So what they looked at was brain activity, again, during that proprioceptive stimulation. And what they found, again, I apologize for the slides being a little bit blurry, but they did some stimulation of the what they call bone stimulation, where they stimulated the distal part of the tibia, and they found that really stimulated just one small area of the brain. Whereas when they stimulated the proprioceptors from the base of the feet, that second image, or the middle image, shows all the different areas that we're highlighting in the brain simultaneously. Now, you'll pick up some of the graph images here. Now, what they found, the red dots are the intensity or the amount of stimulation that they provided, and the yellow dots was the degree of accuracy the subjects could actually detect where their foot or ankle was positioned, at what angle. And what they found, and it was the same for young and for older test subjects, is the more they stimulated, or the greater the stimulation, the greater the accuracy of limb placement. Okay, so that basically means the more you can stimulate those proprioceptive fibers from the feet and the ankle, the more or the better the brain can then control that part of the body. Now, is that important? Yeah, you betcha. How many of us actually recommend people to go for a 5 or 10 minute walk after an adjustment? Pretty much all the time, yeah? So if they're walking or leaving your office after a fantastic adjustment or treatment, whatever you've done, and they're walking on feet where the proprioception is reduced, their brain isn't able to adapt to the contours of what they're walking on, and more than likely they're going to be creating imbalances as soon as they leave your office. So that's another really good piece of research that's come to my attention over the past few weeks. So stability and fall prevention. So again, what they looked at was people who maybe are starting to lose some of the proprioception and the sensation from their feet. And what they found really was that the decreased sensation, particularly the plantar surface of the feet or the plantar fascia, leads to obvious risks of cutaneous injury, but less obvious are the risks of fall-related injuries. So any people that we're looking at that are, beyond their fifth decade, anyone where maybe there's been a long history of diabetes or any other kind of condition that causes or potential peripheral neuropathy, then what happens is they have a much greater risk of having falls. And in the elderly, a fall can actually result in quite a catastrophic event. If they have a fractured hip, for instance, it's not uncommon that they end up in hospital for weeks on end, and then they can contract pneumonia or secondary infections and so on. So that the broken limb doesn't actually kill them off, but the fact that their body or their health goes downhill so rapidly, that can actually lead to their demise. So we want to keep people active. We want to keep them stimulated. We've actually got a patient in the practice, Les. Now he's 102 this year, and he had a couple of falls at the beginning of the year, and we were really quite concerned about him. And as part of that, I actually gave him a pair of the Soul Revolution Orthotics because he was on a pension and he hadn't bought a pair, even though I told him many times. So I gave him a pair of the Orthotics. I said, Les, I want you to wear a pair of these. The next time I saw him, he said, oh my goodness, he says, I can feel my feet again. And I said, what do you mean, Les? He says, I haven't been able to feel my feet properly for years. He said, it's probably been over 20 years that I haven't really been able to feel my feet properly. And now I'm starting to be able to feel as I'm walking around. So, that's made an absolute massive impact on his lifestyle and also his confidence, because he started to lose the confidence to want to go out. He's 102, but he still lives on his own on the island. His daughter's desperate to get him into a home, but he's not having a bar of it. So we've got to keep him active. We've got to keep his confidence up. So some of the research that we've actually done ourselves. So one of those is we looked at a retrospective study. We actually had probably about 5,000 scans, but we stopped at just over 800 patients. And what we realized was just about 94% of adults have got at least one dropped arch. The kicker here, though, is that less than 18% actually complain with or have any foot pain. So they may have a dropped arch, but they're not complaining of pain. And that's one of the reasons I think that the feet are very much overlooked. One is we feel as if we're not podiatrists, we don't feel that we're adequately educated or trained to really make a proper working diagnosis of what the foot needs. Secondly, there's so many people that don't have any foot pain. We obviously ignore that part of the body because number one, we don't think it's our domain or our forte, and number two, the patient's not complaining of it anyway. But when you obviously consider the reason there's no pain, even though there's a dropped arch, is the fact that the nerves are getting switched off and that part of the brain isn't receiving the neurological information, then obviously that then becomes an issue. So another research sample we did a double-blind controlled trial where we had 3 stations that the subjects would stand on, depending on their shoe size. One had no support, one had a generic, like you'd get from the chemist, medial arch only kind of support that you'd have, and then another had the Soul Revolution supports. Then what we did is we had an examiner or a tester who didn't know which station that the subject was standing on, and he used a pressure algometer to determine how much force or how much load the person could actually withstand or hold before their arms failed. And so what we found, and we tested 86 subjects, and what we found was when we averaged the overall strengths or amounts they could withhold, we found about an 11% increase in strength on the Soul Revolution orthotics compared with both the stations with either no support or medial arch only. And so it's quite interesting that the medial only really didn't show a significant increase in strength. But when you think about it, if you're only supporting one arch and not all three, there's a lot of reasons why that wouldn't work. And also in personal experience, I found the most common arch to drop is often the medial arch will go first. The lateral arch will go first because it's the slowest, it's the smallest, and also it's the one that has no support in pretty much all of our shoes. Now here's another one that, again, came to light just recently is we have fat pads under our feet. Now, what I didn't realize is with age and with time, those fat pads actually start to break down and deteriorate. Now, once they break down and deteriorate, they don't regenerate again. And look closely at the positioning of the fat pad. So we've all known about heel strike, but look under the big toe, and then also at the end of the big toe for toe off. Okay, big fat pad, big support. So Podiatry Today, in June of this year, came out with a couple of interesting facts. In 75 years, the human foot traverses over 100,000 miles. Now, that's actually equivalent to just over 4 times walking around the equator, which is pretty incredible. And the most effective treatment for that, they found, really is offloading the involved areas with padding. So that's really, again, another reason for me. Number one, we want to try and preserve those fat pads as best as possible. So if we're going to be walking 4 times around the earth, but on concrete tiles and floorboards, we want to maybe give ourselves a bit of cushioning like we'd have in nature. But also, for patients who are, in their 5th, 6th, or 7th decades and those fat pads are starting to degenerate, we definitely want to support those because that's going to be causing them some issues for sure. So that's where the Soul Revolution orthotics come in, I find so nicely, is that we support the heel, we support the big toe, the metatarsal phalange joint, and also for the toe off section. And that toe off section is just so important for that propulsive gait. And it's that propulsion phase of gait that really helps us lift our posture. It helps us keep our shoulders back and our eyes nice and horizontal. When the big toe isn't supported and it's allowed to slip forwards in shoes, you'll notice there's a postural, a slumping. People tend to drop forwards quite noticeably. So that's essentially what's happening through there. So really with the Soul Revolution orthotics, I started off very much on a therapeutic level with the Soul Revolution and looking to determine, which people need them. And now I really consider the orthotics to be probably more of a wellness product, a little bit like having a decent pillow when you sleep, or having a good office chair when you're sitting in front of the computer. We stress our bodies so much, and the feet is just one of those areas that's just been vastly overlooked and needs a lot of help. So I'm going to go through some of the questions now. I feel like this has been a bit of a whirlwind this evening. I haven't stopped talking. So please type in any questions you have through there. Lisa, yeah, absolutely. I'll send you copies of the research. That's no problem at all, and we'll get that out to you straight after the webinar finishes. Okay, so there's some more questions coming through there as well. Fantastic. So I'll just swap back over to the camera now, so I can actually feel like I'm talking with you. Okay, so we'd like to go through some of the questions that have come in, and there's some really good questions in this session. So the first one is for Helen, and really, I think Helen, from your question, I think you'd like just a little bit of differentiation on the different styles and who would need which orthotics. Is that correct? Okay, great. So Soul Revolution started off with what we now call the performance orthotic. So the performance orthotic really is probably the most popular one because it has it's softer. There is probably maybe a little bit more proprioception you're going to get from this one than the luxury. But what we did find, unfortunately, with this is, especially in more your dress shoe or your fashionable shoe, some people are having difficulty fitting them in their shoe because of the thickness. So what we did is we then came out with we designed the luxury orthotic. So it's much slimmer, and it's also more tailored for the fashion shoe, certainly through the midfoot there, and it's probably got a little bit more ability to be trimmed. When you are trimming the orthotics, though, please be careful not to trim where the supports are through there. We also have the 3/4 length orthotic. Now, the 3/4 length really is for ladies who have open-toe shoes or heels. So they're nice and flexible. They can go in a high heel, and they have the Velcro tab at the back to help prevent them from slipping forwards and backwards. And in each pair, they should get a spare Velcro tab for the shoe. So hopefully that helps to answer your question there, Helen. Okay, so we have Tom. So yes, within insurance. Okay, now that's a really good question. It really depends on your qualifications or how you're registered. So if you're a podiatrist or you have podiatry qualifications, there is a code called F240, which allows you to prescribe preformed orthotics. And these Soul Revolution do fall into that category. But not all providers can use that code, so do check before you use that one. It is a Class 1 medical device, and as a Class 1 medical device, you, again, check with your tax advisor, but as far as I'm aware, you can actually claim them back on your tax at the end of the year. So that's good. So that kind of comes into to your question, Sally. How long do they last? Well, to get the Class 1 medical device certification, one of the things you have to do is you have to get the orthotics wear tested. So getting them wear tested, what we did is we had to put them on a machine, and they basically spun them around and tested them and bent them and did all kinds of things, which was equivalent to a year of just normal usage. So they passed that test, no problem at all. But of course, a little bit of common sense with this one is, if you buy a pair of running shoes, typically, they'll last you, say, 8 months to a year. But if you're doing a lot of training, a lot of running, those kind of things, they're going to wear out more quickly. Same with the orthotics for sure. So then that goes to David. Yeah. Okay. So the 30-day money-back guarantee. So you can see at the top corner we've got the 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, what we encourage you to do is ask whoever's buying them to fill in. Now, when on the inside of the box, there's this flyer. Now, on there's a link where people can actually go to register their product, and that essentially that triggers the 30-day money-back guarantee. So we know when they purchase them, so they can have that 30-day grace period. But also when they go onto that link, they get exercises, so rolling your foot over a ball to help release tension in the plantar fascia, because sometimes what you might find when people start wearing the orthotics is they might actually notice their feet or their ankles start to ache or hurt, and it's a little bit like it's a bit like rehab as you walk, or taking your feet to the gym, because with the trampoline effect, the softness of the arches, what it does is it encourages movement, and some people, they just haven't had that movement in their feet for a long time. So imagine going to the gym for the first time in a long time. They're going to get that same delayed muscle soreness or training ache, as it were. So when they register on this link, they get exercises, so calf stretches and rolling your foot over the tennis ball. but also we give care instructions, how to look after, because the last thing you want when you're running a busy practice is to have to spend a lot of extra time explaining how people should wash them and what kind of exercise they should do and how they should feel and all those kind of things. So it's all explained when they log onto that, they get that information. But also what we do is we have an automated system. So in about 8 months, they'll actually get an email saying, look, you bought your orthotics from Dr. David 8 months ago, probably about time you had them checked and look into maybe getting another pair. So that also, maybe the person hasn't been in to see you for a little while, they get that email and think, oh, okay, yeah, no, it's time to go back. I need an adjustment or a treatment anyway. So with the money back guarantee, so let me get back to that. Now, obviously, as a wholesaler or a distributor, you're getting them at wholesale costs. So when someone buys them from you at retail, if they want the money back guarantee, they need to go back to you to get the retail refund, and then we'll either refund you the amount that the orthotics cost, the wholesale amount, or we'll add an extra pair into your next order. We can't obviously refund them the full retail amount because we didn't sell them for that amount in the first place. So hope that clarifies, because there's been a little bit of confusion on that. So the different styles, yes, we've got that. How to order? Look, there's a few different ways to order. The easiest is probably online. If you go to soulrevolutionorthotics.com and follow the prompts, and you can do that 24/7. We ship within 24 working hours of receiving an order, so you can get them nice and promptly. Now, if you don't like ordering online, or you just find it easier to pick up a phone, then give us a call at the office. I'm pretty sure most of you have the number for the office here, 0404 762 423, or send us an email, soulrevolutionorthotics@gmail.com, and either way round we can get the orders out to you. I understand what it's like when you're busy. You really don't want to mess around with orders. You want to make it as easy as possible. So whichever way you want to order, that's all fine. So yes, more questions through here. I think we've covered most of the basics. Yes. So yes, that's good. Thank you, Sophia. So you'll notice sometimes with the luxury orthotics, the material will look different on the left one than it will on the right one. At the end of the day, this is leather. It's a natural product. It's a little bit like if you got a foot-shaped stamp and took stamps out of pieces of wood, the grain would be different on each piece. Same with the leather, because obviously it's a natural product, so it's not necessarily consistent through each one. So don't worry if one side looks quite different to the other. That's just the law of nature. The underneath the supports are the same, and that's what we've worked on. Well, I think that covers most of the questions. So really, to wrap it up, I think a good way to look at the orthotics is, this really is a wellness product. It's about how do we help people stay well in an environment that's very harsh on them. And probably our feet have been one of the most overlooked areas when it comes to management or looking after them, because of the hard surfaces, because of the poor poor support we get in shoes. So this is just something that they can use on a day-to-day basis. It's non-invasive. Okay, we're not creating big shifts or changes in the positioning. It really is working on that really getting that proper support and that proper action as nature intended. And it's generic, so you don't have to have podiatry training. You don't have to have spend a lot of time measuring and analyzing. They just go straight in their shoes, and they can move them from shoe to shoe. Their shoes should all be the same size, one would hope. So again, thank you so much for coming online and joining the webinar today, and even bigger thank you for supporting Soul Revolution. I really do think you're going to find you get more and more positive feedback, and we'd love to hear some of your stories. If you've got the time, just to send us some of the stories of how people have really had their lives changed from Soul Revolution, that'd be fantastic. So again, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.